Audience, your vote counts. You know who I am, you know who they are. Let's get into this. First topic, bad trend. Student proficiency, what's going on?
Yeah, there's some reports out this week on proficiency among Oklahoma public school students, and the bad news is less than a quarter of students when tested this year were able to be proficient in things like math and science and English. This is a terrible trend for the state of Oklahoma. I know our state superintendent said not to look into these trends very much, but you know, as a parent of kids in Oklahoma City Public Schools, I think it is imperative that we keep kids in school 5 days a week, that we do everything possible to catch our students up. Obviously, the pandemic and kids being out of school has a huge factor in this. But this is a really bad deal, not just for our state and our students, but I think in a national trend as well.
So we've had this pandemic. A lot of states are in the same boat, but your thoughts about where we go from here?
Well, I couldn't disagree more that we shouldn't look into these trends. We must look into these trends. Now, we must recognize this is a result of, because of the pandemic, of not being in-person school. Absolutely, that's part of the result. But, you know, when it comes to statistics, when it happens to you, it's one of one. We have got to continue to invest in public education. We have to target the federal money, the over $2 billion that we have, to target wisely, to put it in towards student outcomes. So how do we do student outcomes? Number one, we invest. We put a good, strong, well-paid teacher in the classroom, and we have high academic expectations. And we suffer from that. We don't have high enough academic expectations. We've got to look at these. Our kids need it, and this is a crisis point.
Okay, remember about a year ago whenever people were saying, oh, Joe Biden's going to be the president, he's going to kill oil and natural gas and blah, blah. Well, the governor had Southern States Energy Board in town this week. We've got a lot of renewables in Oklahoma that are burgeoning, but so is the oil and gas industry because of natural gas prices, oil prices all up. Why?
Yeah, well, a large portion that they're up right now is because we have to have oil and natural gas in order to fund our energy infrastructure, despite everything President Biden is doing. If you look at his new energy plan, he is trying to run the death nail of specifically natural gas in addition to oil and gas by 2030, which makes no sense. You're seeing them pivot away from a clean, safe, renewable, well, not renewable, but a clean and safe energy source in natural gas, and they're treating that the same as oil and gas. President Biden is doing everything he can to crush the carbon industry, period. It makes absolutely no sense. Oklahoma needs to adopt an all-of-the-above energy policy, but we have to continue to embrace our natural gas roots.
It's an interesting comment. There is, the Democrats can't get out of their way in Washington, so I'm just wondering, do you think that what he's talking about is a concern?
Well, I think what we can see from this is that what happens in Washington, D.C. doesn't necessarily affect the energy sector. The energy sector has a very natural up and down cycle, and what we're seeing now is a cycle that's starting to swing back on the up, and that's great news for the state of Oklahoma. Higher natural gas prices are really good for the state of Oklahoma. Higher oil prices are good. The rig count continuing to go up is good for the state of Oklahoma and for jobs, especially in rural areas. So I think what we learned from this is that energy is on the rise. It's a good thing for Oklahoma. We need to invest in renewables just like we need to invest in our oil and gas industry here in Oklahoma.
Coming up in our next half hour, there's a little tiff on the prairie. Oh, the weed man and the cowman should be friends, but they're not. You want to bring us up? There's a story this week on News 9 about how the cattlemen and weed growers in the state of Oklahoma do not like each other.
Well, they don't, and this is the state's fault, though. I've run bills for 3 straight years that have died in the Senate to take the OMMA out of the Department of Health, where it's not doing a good job with regulating the medical marijuana industry, and either make it its own state agency or put it in with ABLE. All 3 of those were killed, and now we're dealing with the problems that we failed to correct. I think Adria Berry with OMMA is doing a great job. She's stepped up enforcement, but now you have rural Oklahoma complaining about the same things that those of us, even the legitimate people in the medical marijuana industry, have been complaining about for 3 years. We need to get this done next year, and we need to call our senators and tell them it's time to have something that is going to work for medical marijuana.
That's a little shot across the Senate bow. So in other words, in Oklahoma, we've not gone as far as we could go. I'm sorry. Your thoughts about this issue?
Well, look, there's a lot to unpack here. A couple of things that I think are important in this discussion are the state of California, which is much larger than the state of Oklahoma, has fewer growing licenses than we have here in the state of Oklahoma. We don't have a cap on that. The licenses to grow are continuing to grow here in the state of Oklahoma, which is expanding this business, and it's forcing out a lot of things that have happened traditionally in rural Oklahoma, things like cow-calf operations. And there's a big issue with fertilizer and how it's being used in crops and in fields out in rural Oklahoma. Look, every time that I've talked to my friends in rural Oklahoma, this issue is not going away. It's becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and I predict there'll be some bills run on this in the spring.
I'm guessing so. Family Rogers and Hammerstein just sent me a text and said, stop. Okay, so we will. All right, our last topic. The governor has called for a special session over redistricting. I can see some, well, the governor and legislature are not happy with what the feds are doing.
Yeah, we are going to have special session here in November. The governor has made that call. I think what's important for us this morning on this is a number of other states have had special sessions here recently to deal with redistricting, but they've added in other measures. Our governor this year has said that's not going to be the case. We are only going to focus on redistricting. That is the most important thing for us to focus on right now. It's constitutional that we get this right. We make sure that our district lines are drawn for elections in the 22 cycle. I'm happy that the legislature is going to just focus on this and not draw their attention away on a lot of other things that could, delve into unnecessary.
Well, we're quoting the president, as he once said, this is a big deal. It is a big deal, isn't it?
It is a big deal. The reason we're going into special session, because I get asked that, is because the census data was released, the latest it's ever been released in the history of the country, in the history of the United States. They blew past all of their dates that they were supposed to hit. I think there's a lot of political reasons they did that, dealing with some eastern states during redistricting. But in any event, the Oklahoma legislature is going to go in and do their job. It'll be a 5-day special session. We'll pass maps for the House, the Senate, and then a congressional map. We'll be coming in the week of November 15th. We'll get it done in 1 week, and we'll do our constitutional duty.
Just in time for Thanksgiving. All right. See this again at news9.com/YourVoteCounts. Follow me on Twitter @MitchellTalks.